I'd like to welcome the Minister to the House. And at the outset, to say that in anywhere we travel around the country, the high esteem that the Minister for Youth Affairs and Children, Minister Francis Fitzgerald, is held in, I think it's important to put that on the record. People do appreciate that it is a full cabinet portfolio, and they do respect and regard the fine job she is doing. Despite the limited resources at the disposal of the government, it is an important area to have, I think, designated within the cabinet. Recently, I had the privilege and pleasure of attending a Monasterevin Youth Action presentation on the need for youth services and facilities in the area, and it was indeed a most compelling and convincing and credible presentation from the young people from this area of South Kildare in Monasterevin. It was all the more poignant and important to myself as I grew up in Monasterevin and indeed went to school in St. Paul's Secondary School and was a member of the first ever Leaving Cert class from St. Paul's Secondary School in Monasterevin. And it was very convincing, as I said, to see the young people taking ownership of this issue and taking responsibility and carrying the campaign directly into the public domain and to public representatives and to leaders within their community. They have the assistance of people like the principal of the school, Mr. Brian Berrigan and Paul Marin, and others involved in Kildare Youth Services, such as Mr. Pat Balfe. But it was definitely an organic presentation, which was in the ownership of the young people themselves, people like Jenny Byrne, who did a fine job on the evening, emceeing and hosting the evening, and others like Patricia Downey, Moses Aribo and Savannah Muller come to mind, just to mention a few of the young people who took part in that presentation. However, it was also a sad occasion for me, Minister, and it's why I've tabled this question to you this evening, because it was clear to me that when the young people said that their abiding memory of growing up in the town was one of boredom, that for me was very disturbing. And it would be terrible to think that an entire generation of young people would go through that experience in the town, seeing themselves as having almost nothing to do, nowhere to go, and indeed just nowhere to congregate, or if you like, to hang out. The town, I believe, has grown in population 4- and 5-fold, but the level of facilities and amenities are now less than they were when I was going to school and when I was growing up in the town. The hall, the CYMS hall that we used to, if you like, go to play pool and snooker and darts and hang out in, is boarded up. The tennis courts are overgrown. The sports hall has been demolished. So this is very disturbing and a retrograde in a town that has a day school, and I'm here now appealing to the Minister this evening to ensure that towns like Monasterevin get their fair share of resources to enhance and improve these facilities, which are badly, badly needed. We cannot on one hand condemn and criticise young people for hanging around the streets or hanging around street corners on one hand, or indeed gravitating towards the pub culture when we don't provide proper facilities for them. And the town of Monasterevin is crying out for a youth facility, a youth cafe, a place where they can hang out and have ownership of their own space, a dedicated youth space. And I say that because I know how the youth cafe system has been such a success around the country. In Portlaoise, I can see the work of people like Joe Thompson and Serena Donovan and others coming to great fruition in the success that is the Portlaoise Youth Cafe, where the young people have ownership of the space and the facility and the amenity, and it's thriving and it's prospering and it's doing good. And I believe it's a very holistic and healthy experience for those young people, where they look out for each other and assist each other in a very constructive way. But I also want to put on the record, Minister, that I'm not at all happy that when we go and research the figures in terms of government funding for youth services, Kildare and Laois and Offaly come off very poorly per capita in terms of the investment that has been made for youth facilities and youth resources. In some cases, they're actually receiving up to 10 times less than other centres and other counties around the country. And I think we need to address that in the next round of funding for youth services and youth facilities, And I would hope that we could redress that imbalance so that towns like Monasterevin can finally have the youth services, the youth facilities and a dedicated space for young people that it requires and deserves, and I think it will be money well spent. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you, Senator. Minister.
I'm taking this German debate on behalf of Francis Fitzgerald TD, Minister for Children and Youth Affairs, and I want to thank Senator Whelan for raising the issue. The Youth Affairs Unit of the Department of Children and Youth Affairs supports the delivery of a range of youth work programmes and services for all young people, including those from disadvantaged communities, by the voluntary youth sector. These schemes include the Youth Service Grant Scheme, the Special Projects for Youth Scheme, the Young People's Facilities and Services Fund Rounds 1 and 2, the Local Drug Task Force projects, and certain other programmes, including the Local Youth Club Grant Scheme, Youth Information Centres, the European Youth in Action Programme, administered by Lergus, and GASHCA, the President's Award. These funding schemes support national and local youth work provision to some 400,000 young people and involve approximately 1,400 paid staff and 40,000 volunteers working in youth work services and communities throughout the country. In 2013, an amount of €1.75 million was provided for capital projects in the provision of services for young people, made up of an allocation of €1.5 million for new youth cafes and €250,000 for the provision of play and recreation facilities. Pobal assisted the Department with the application and the evaluation process for the Youth Cafe scheme. Some 95 applications were received, and to be eligible, applications were required to demonstrate that the proposed new youth cafe would be developed in line with the Department's youth cafes in Ireland, a best practice guide, that the facility would target 12 to 25-year-olds and aim to meet the needs of the local youth population, particularly in disadvantaged areas. Criteria also include the extent to which the proposed new youth cafe would add value to existing provision for young people in a locality, the capacity of the organisers to effectively manage the project, the involvement of youth themselves in the development of the project, and how the project would be sustainable, and the strength, indeed, of the overall proposal. Eligible applications were then appraised on the basis of a detailed assessment of the extent to which the criteria were met. The applications were further evaluated, taking into account of youth population, existing youth service provision, and geographic considerations. Following the completion of the assessment and evaluation process, 30 proposals for new youth cafe projects were approved for funding. This included funding towards the cost of setting up a new youth cafe facility in Kildare town. And while an application was received in respect of a new facility in Monasterevin, this application was unsuccessful on this occasion, as it did not achieve a sufficiently high score when assessed against the programme criteria. Some €49.78 million is being made available to support the provision of youth services in 2014. The Department of Children and Youth Affairs, in line with government policy, has been required to achieve significant savings on schemes and services as indicated in the Comprehensive Review of Expenditure. The final allocations for 2014 take account of the €1 million allocated in the budget of 2014 to offset the impact of the Comprehensive Review of Expenditure on youth services and other identified efficiencies. The funding allocations for 2014 will involve a reduction of 3.75% on the allocations provided in 2013 for each of the schemes as follows: the Youth Service Grant Scheme, the Special Projects for Youth, Young People's Facilities and Services Rounds 1 and 2, Youth Information Centres and Local Drug Task Force projects. Notification of funding for individual youth projects and organisations was issued by the Youth Affairs Unit of the Department last week to the relevant grant administering agencies and national youth organisations. And in order to ensure that the maximum use is made of the available resources, the Department has in previous years afforded flexibility to youth services and grant administering agencies, mainly education and training boards, to reconfigure the funding allocations made by the Department on the basis of their knowledge of the needs in their own respective areas. Again, for 2014, it's open to grant administering agencies and youth services to submit proposals for reconfiguration of the allocations to individual projects, provided the overall financial allocations for the area remain within the allocated funding for this year. This approach will help ensure that we respond to local needs and that the services being provided are relevant to the challenges young people are experiencing and target those most in need. Proposals for the reconfiguration of allocations will be subject to the approval of the Department of Children and Youth Affairs. The new capital funding programme for 2014 involves €750,000 for the provision of youth services to young people throughout the country. It comprises €250,000 for play and recreation initiatives and €500,000 for staff-led youth projects under the various schemes funded by the Youth Affairs Unit of the Department. Details of the Youth Projects Capital Scheme, including the application process, are being finalised at present, and Public will assist the Department with the application and appraisal process, and detailed information and guidelines for applying for the funding will also be available in the second quarter of 2014. I think it's also worth mentioning the fact that the government reinstated the Sports Capital Programme last year under the guidance and direction of Minister Ring. And last year there was in the order of €30 million available for dispersal to sports groups across the country, and this year there was something close to €40 million. And again, a significant amount of the scoring attributed to the applications under that programme will be directed towards facilities that serve young people, and particularly disadvantaged young people in their own areas.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Whelan, is that...
Thanks very much. Minister, I'm very grateful for that, because it is very a thorough and comprehensive response, and it does indeed set out a clear roadmap under which a qualification can be achieved in the various headings. And the government is to be commended for ring-fencing the funding in this sector. I am a little surprised that the Monasterevin application didn't meet the required standards in terms of the appraisal criteria, because I am absolutely certain that the people behind the project are excellent. I believe that the need is there, is defined. There's no question that Monasterevin is crying out for these facilities and amenities. As I say, the amenities and facilities for young people are actually worse now than they were when I was growing up over 30 or 40 years ago. It's hard to believe, despite the expansion in the town. And I also believe that, that the challenge is there now for the people involved, for the young people themselves, and indeed for those involved in the Monasterevin Youth Action Group, to step up now and renew their application this year, and to ensure that they do meet the criteria, that they do tick all the boxes in terms of the appraisal, and that they do finally succeed in achieving a dedicated space, a youth cafe and a youth facility, which I think will form the basis of moving forward for an area that is disadvantaged. And it would be vital. I think it's money well spent, and I think that, Mullen August Chucking Sheet, Minister, and I know you agree with that, and we have to assist them in going forward so as to not have them feeling bewildered and bored in their teenage years, which can only lead to all sorts of other problems and social difficulties later on in life. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Senator.
To quickly just commend the Senator for his very obviously proactive engagement with the young people of Monasterevin, and indeed community activists who are working towards providing necessary services for those young people, and I wish them every success in their endeavours this year in securing the required.
Thank you, Minister. Next matter.